Welcome to Total Money Management. I'm back with Steve. How you going?
Total money chaos.
Total money crazy. We're having so today's a tariff special. It's obviously timely given the tariffs that Trump and the administration's imposed by the time this is released about a week ago. And the questions, I guess, that is coming from this. So, Steve, we just wanted to cover what they are, the kind of general consensus of why they've come around, the questions that we're getting across socials and that we're seeing are, what the hell do we do now? Where do we invest? What the crap's going on? And then the how really being, how do we go about that? How do we invest in the US? Do we not? Do we invest in Europe? What do the tariffs do long term? Is it going to impact inflation? All those questions will be answered, hopefully. And hopefully there's more questions, and you can come to us anytime and ask those.
I'm sure there will be lots of questions.
And as always, like, this is developing, right? So this is going to develop over the next...
Folks, it's fluid.
Yeah. So what we're saying now is obviously not financial advice and will change. So we'll keep everyone updated as much as possible.
So keep listening.
Yeah.
We need the numbers.
So we're trying to make it funny, because otherwise it'd be boring as sin.
Yes. Now, before we get into this, do you want to go? No, we'll go through this first, and then we'll. Yeah.
So we've got photos of the for the people that are listening and watching on YouTube, Spotify video. We will upload this. And hold us accountable, because sometimes we forget. We'll upload this to the Spotify, YouTube, so you can download the document and see what we're talking about as well. But I just wanted to start with a quote, I guess, from, is this Trump himself?
Yes.
Edna Curran, yeah. So Trump gets straight into it and says, for decades, the US has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. So, but essentially what this is saying is people have been taking the piss out of the US for so long, and something had to be done, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, whether it's someone else. And this is what's being done.
It's everybody. Everybody's been getting into it. Now, before we get into that, let me just read a paragraph here. This is one thing I'd urge everybody to do. Go and read the primary documents.
Where do they find them, Steve?
Right. This is from the White House, right? This is the, if you type in White House statement on tariffs, right, it'll come up. It's regulating imports with a reciprocal tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to large and persistent annual United States good trade deficits, right? Liberation Day, April the 2nd. Now, it's barely, 8 pages or something. And only nerdy people like me read them. But I want to read you one paragraph because it encapsulates the whole problem. When people say, why are we here? What's the reason these are done? I'm going to tell you right now, okay? And it's the fourth paragraph in the executive action, right? Okay. Large and persistent annual US goods trade deficits have led to the hollowing out of our manufacturing base, inhibited our ability to scale advanced domestic manufacturing capacity, undermined critical supply chains, and rendered our defence industrial base dependent upon foreign adversaries, right? Okay. Now, I've got to say too, this has started all in about 1990, okay? So it's not like it happened last year. Large and persistent annual US good trade deficits are caused in substantial part by the lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships. We're doing the right thing, you mongrels are not, right? Okay. This situation is evidenced by disparate tariff rates and non-tariff barriers that make it harder for the US manufacturers to sell their products in foreign markets, okay? We put 5% on yours, you put 45% on ours, and you give these non-tariff barriers, regulations, so we can't sell our products because they're just not competitive, okay? It's also evidenced by the economic policies of key US trading partners insofar as they suppress domestic wages and consumption and thereby demand for US exports while artificially increasing the competitiveness of their own goods, of their goods in global markets. Okay, that's the Chinese consumption stuff, right? Low wages, even though they should raise them, right? And buy more exports.
Yep.
US stuff, right? These conditions have given rise to the national emergency that this order is intended to abate and resolve. Okay? So Trump is saying what we've been saying for a while, which is everyone's taken the mickey out of the United States and they've had enough. Right? And now they're all screaming blue murder, of course, but that's the why are they doing this, right? Okay, so now we can talk about, what a tariff is.
So what's a tariff?
Because most people under 45 probably haven't heard of it.
Yeah.
I'll read again. A tariff is a duty imposed by the national government on imported goods. They're a source of revenue and can be a form of regulation of foreign trade and policy that burden foreign products to encourage or safeguard domestic industry. Okay, what does that mean? Right. What that means is, Jacob, you're selling me, you're exporting a product to me, and I say to you, I'm going to put a 20% charge on top of your product. So when it hits my shore, right, it's $1. I'm going to put a 20% tariff on it. So Bobby, when you import Jacob's stuff, it's not $1, it's $1.20, and that 20 cents goes to the government.
Yep.
Right? Now, we'll talk more about how that impacts markets and economies, but that's what the tariff is, right? Okay. Why do they use tariffs? Many developing countries use tariffs as a way to build domestic industries, right? So let's say I'm a place like, I don't know, China, right? And you say, geez, we really want to make a big industry here and get rich. And I come along and say, you guys need to build cars, right? Cars are really good. Okay, well, we can't because everybody else has got cars that are a lot better than ours, right? We can build a car, but the quality's shit, right? And it's really expensive. And no one wants to buy it because it's garbage. Okay, so what do we do? So what we do is we say, all right, well, let's put 100% tariff on foreign cars. And in the interim, the government will say, listen, Jacob, I want you to build a car factory. Listen, mate, I'll give you cheap loans. Just get in there and build a really good quality car.
Figure it out.
And you say, how can I do that? And I say, listen, why don't you have a joint venture with those really good car builders and they'll transfer the technology, right? Technology transfer, right? So that's why they do it. Then what you do is you maybe have some homegrown winners like Toyota and BYD, and then you start causing trouble for the foreign car makers, right? And then the foreign car makers leave and you go, great, now we'll sell them our cars, right? That's the way you do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they use it for. They use it to build industry.
Yeah.
Okay. A foreign country can manipulate their currency to negate the effects of a tariff, right? We'll talk more about that. Currency manipulation is also makes local producers more expensive, right? So a tariff is added to foreign imports to make the local products competitive. So that's what Trump's doing at the moment, right? What he's saying is, Jacob, you're manipulating your currency, right? Keeping it low so you can export into my market. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 20% on top of it. My local producer in Alabama says, cool. I was $1.20 and Jacob's $1. Now he's $1.20 and I'm $1.20. So now we've got a level playing field.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, how do you think? I know Trump's obviously said, don't mess with the currencies. But
yes,
he's obviously put the kind of shot across the bow. But how do you think currencies are going to respond? Yeah.
We'll talk about that further on. But just again, with the history, you can see there's Smoot-Hawley. That was in the Great Depression in 1930. Smoot and Hawley were US congressmen. They put together the tariffs that basically tariffed, again, foreign products, okay? And they saw that as a way to continue to build American industry and local demand, right?
Didn't people say that caused the Depression?
Yeah, they did, but the Depression was underway. It's not as simple as that, but essentially the Depression was caused by a lack of government spending and a boom in private debt, which is exactly what we've had. It's exactly right, exactly like we've had now.
That rhymes a bit, doesn't it?
Right, that's what I mean. History rhymes, right? Righto. Why is he doing it? Now, first of all, Congress is usually the one that implements tariffs, right?
Yeah.
So Trump can't just unilaterally go, I'm putting tariffs on, right? Usually Congress says, they're being naughty, we'll determine the tariff level, right? Now, however, the President of the United States, under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which was brought in by Jimmy Carter in 1977, allows him to do stuff like this, right? Particularly if it's about national security, right? So, 9/11,
Yep.
right? They declare it a national emergency. That gives the president powers to go, right, we're going to war and we're going to bomb somebody.
To make decisions, yeah.
Okay, unilaterally, right, by himself. Now, generally, most presidents would consult,
Yeah.
right? But Trump's not doing that. But that's,
Or he's consulting with the, quote, right people.
Yeah, the right
agree
people,
with him.
right? So here's the important part, really, really important. This is not just about economics, right? Now, remember, Trump said, and rendered our defence industrial, right? Defence industrial base dependent upon foreign adversaries. We'll talk more about that. What Trump is saying here is it's not just about you guys selling cars. It's about our national defence, how we build ships, how we build bombs, how we build planes, right? And we'll get to that in a minute. But the aim is to keep the US as the sole superpower, right, which it's enjoyed since the fall of the communism in 1990, right, because China's rising. So China's now a threat. So US has to find ways to make China subservient to the US goals, okay? So it's all about China, right? Trump is trying to reduce the Chinese stranglehold on many critical industries. These days, a lot of military is about technology, right? Drones, space, all that sort of stuff, right? So, for an example, when you build a jet aeroplane that's basically invisible, you need to have materials that withstand enormous temperatures, right? Because those engines are, put out enormous amounts of heat. The thing that does that is critical minerals like neodymium and gallium, right? They can withstand huge temperature. So you need to build those into the plane. If you haven't got those, your plane can't fly fast because it can't withstand the heat, right, given off. Who controls all those? China, right? So again, we'll talk a bit further about that, but that's what Trump is saying. We are relying on the Chinese to process the stuff that we need to build national security boats, ships, and stuff in case someone like China attacks, right? And we mentioned this about 12 months ago where we've been saying it's ridiculous that the US dig up the rare earths, they send it to China, China processes it and sends it back, and the US puts it in bombs that they then orient the Chinese, right? Both sides are looking at it going, dude, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it does economically.
For the sake of capitalism, yeah.
It does economically, right? And this is why I say all these economists going, oh, we don't get it. It's like, dude, it's not about economics. It's about national security, right? So this is why politics is reasserting itself over markets, because markets make dumb decisions. They're amoral, right? Markets don't care. It's all about cheapness and efficiency.
Yeah.
Right? Countries are not about cheapness and efficiency. They're about protecting national borders and their interests, right? Okay, imposing tariffs is a way to reduce Chinese exports. Okay, higher prices mean lower demand. If you're sending me 1 million widgets a year and I say, right, I'm going to put 40% tariff on those widgets, people go, oh, man, I'm not buying those widgets, right? We've been talking about Dorito corn chips, right? They're going from $4 to $8. I'm outraged. I'm not buying Doritos anymore, right? And I've stopped buying them, right? That's what happens.
Start a principle.
Yeah. But China says, oh, man, we're not selling as many Doritos.
Yeah.
What do we do? Well, we have to find someone else to buy the Doritos. We have to buy the Doritos ourselves. We have to try and lower the price of the Doritos, or we have to sack everybody because no one's buying Doritos, right? China runs a trade surplus because it saves more than it invests domestically, which means it produces more than it consumes and invests in export surplus. Sorry, folks, long story. What I'm simply saying there is China creates excess production, right? We need 20 million cars. Okay, let's build a factory that sells 60 million. And it's like, okay, but we only need 20. It's like, yeah, but we're going to export the rest of them.
Yeah.
That's what's going on, right?
And
it's doing that across the board, everywhere. Steel, aluminium, bloody gallium, cars, iPhones, everything is basically produced out of China.
Yeah.
Right, because it's so goddamn cheap.
And it's produced more than the global consumption needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's the issue? Force China to raise its extremely low level of consumption, meaning importing more goods. Okay? You guys have got capacity for 40 million cars. You sell 25, but you could probably sell an extra 10 a year locally if you raise wages and let people consume more. But as I've said before, Xi doesn't want to do that, right? He thinks that's decadence. Okay, fine. Now we're going to force you to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
Okay. And how do you think the Chinese people will...
Well, we'll get to that, but China has basically responded by going, right, 34% tariffs on you.
Some
because
tariffs back.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. That one there's just the numbers. Don't need to linger long on it. Just showing who the US has a deficit and a surplus with. You will note down the bottom that we have a deficit with the states, right? And that's why a lot of economists here are complaining, going, dude, you sell more of it stuff to us than we do to you. Why are we being tariffed, right? But as Trump said, friend and foes alike.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And maybe it's because of the relationship with China as well, trying to...
That's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Australia's going to be in a bit of a difficult position, right? Because what Trump is doing is saying, particularly again to Mexico and Canada and Vietnam, where he's put a 46% tariff on, right? People are going, what the fuck, Vietnam? Full of Chinese investment, right? So what China is doing is saying, we'll just build in Mexico, right? Because they've only got a 5% tariff and in fact they haven't got a tariff, so we'll build in Mexico and export to the US that way.
Yeah.
And we'll still spy on them through the cars,
Yeah.
right? And Trump's gone, nah, we're not even going down that road. That's why this is why I say you've got to know about this stuff, because it gets you to go, okay, now I know why Donald Trump's doing it. Whether you agree with it or not is neither here nor there. You have to say, what's the purpose of it, right? And a lot of people are saying there's no strategy. I don't think that's entirely correct.
Yeah.
And besides that, unless you're a professional boxer, most people when they fight don't have a plan, right? They just go in there swinging. Well, that's what's happening at the moment. Everybody's just swinging wildly and seeing where it lands, right?
Yeah. What's next? Issues.
Okay. As I said before, tariff avoidance backdoors are key to watch, right? That's why Trump is hammering Canada and Mexico.
But there's no tariffs on them.
No, but what he's saying is, but there's a stipulation with US parts, right? Now, most American cars are built in between the US, Canada and Mexico, and they go across the border lots of times.
Yeah.
Right? So Trump says, cool, we'll keep that, right? But what Trump is saying is particularly Mexico, right? No more Chinese investment into the car industry where they're inserting their chips into our cars and then tracking the data.
Yeah, so they're just watching it closely, I guess.
Yeah. What they're doing is saying, China says, well, listen, we can't export out of, Shenzhen, right? And they say, okay, well, that's cool. We'll just export out of Mexico. Right? Cool. Right? That's why Trump is saying everybody has got to work it out and that's why we're saying it's a national security issue, because Trump is saying to Australia, if you want to sell that stuff to China, fine, but we're not coming down there to protect you if the bloody Chinese are sailing down there and causing problems. Right? That's where Australia's going to have to make a decision. Right? Because we can't continue, like Trump is saying, we can't continue to be funding foreign adversaries. If China wants to bomb us, good, they can build their own goddamn bombs and they're not getting any help from us.
Yeah.
Right? And Trump is saying, listen, Albo, you're selling all this iron ore and stuff to China, which is building the bombs that they're aiming at us. Pick a side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Now, naturally, like Europe, they're all screaming blue murder and stuff, right? But this is, like I say, this has been coming for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be an interesting 12, 24 months.
Well, it's going to be pretty wild. Now, just on that, so what tariffs do is try and redress that trade imbalance, right? Even if Trump succeeds in reducing the deficit with China, they simply cause the US deficit with the rest of the world, along with Chinese surplus, to rise. Yes and no. That argument says, what that is saying is, well, like I said to you, China will say, oh, well, we'll just export to Mexico and they'll export to the US, right? That's what Trump's trying to stop. So that's why I've highlighted, this is why you need to deal with this on a global basis. This is why Trump's strategy is to tariff everybody. Right? What Trump is doing is saying to all of these countries, you're either with us or against us. If you want to be with China, that's fine. You get nothing off us, including military protection.
Yeah.
Right? That's what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it doesn't make sense to not tariff Mexico then and Canada if they're just going to do that anyway.
It depends. It depends on what the goods are. So if Mexico says, oh, dude, I want to buy T-shirts from China, it's like, okay, fine. Oh, mate, I want to buy advanced lithography machines from China. It's like, no.
Right. Okay.
So this is where it gets a little bit more specific. And this is why I suspect Trump is saying we're up for negotiation, right? Because he will say, that's okay, that's not.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay, that's not. Right, and it gets, this is why it gets confusing and uncertain for a lot of countries and companies because they're going, well, are we in advanced manufacturing? I don't know, mate. Someone ring the White House and find out. It's like, oh, well, hang on, it says it in the document. Oh, well, does that mean we tariffed? And it's like, well, I don't know. Ring the customs agents. He said they're not sure. They got to talk to the White House. Hang on, Trump's made a statement. Oh no, we're not sure. Jesus Christ, no one knows what's going on, right? And I'm not kidding. This is what.
And everyone's just going too hard basket.
Yeah, well, everyone's just going, what the bloody hell's going on?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
That's why markets are selling off partly with the uncertainty of saying, what's going to happen? We don't know. Go to cash.
Yeah, cash.
Right?
We'll wait.
We've had a 15-year bull market, right? Cool. Take all the profits.
And other countries selling out as well.
Yep.
Because to reinvest in their own bloody country.
Their own country. So the argument is that US will still have trade deficits because of the higher dollar. And we'll talk a bit more about that because currencies are really complicating it, right? But generally what the argument is it doesn't matter what happens because the US will still run a trade deficit. So therefore, this doesn't make any sense. I don't agree with that position. I think it makes sense in the long run. And as I said, if you look at it through a national security lens, what Trump is trying to say is, look, if you want to buy Chinese T-shirts, good for you, right? But you're not buying any advanced stuff, right? And the Huawei stuff, right? The communication stuff, right? TikTok. Right, because the Chinese are downloading all that data, right, and using it. So what Trump is doing is saying, right, we're going to cut that off, and that's what he started that in 2016. Biden continued it in 2020.
Yeah.
Right, and now Trump is back for a second shot, and he's a lot more annoyed because he realised the first time around he was a bit too softer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, market impacts. Righto, uncertainty and confusion, right, as we just explained. Large structural changes in global trade patterns and relationships, disruption, reorganisation of supply chains. That's going to be huge. It's already underway, but this just catalyses it unbelievably. Okay, potential increases in manufacturing. Boys come back home and build it here. Somewhat dependent on currency offsets and reciprocal tariffs. We'll talk about that next. Potential lower economic growth from higher prices, right? You've got $300 a week. That's all you got. If everything's more expensive, that means there's less growth.
Yeah.
Okay. The government also gets more money from tax revenue.
Yeah.
Right. And so the more tax you take out of the economy, the less demand there is. Right. may be offset by other domestic policies. Okay, part of what Trump is saying is, yeah, we realise that things will be more expensive, but we're going to make them cheaper by giving you tax cuts, right, and cheaper energy, right. So I say to you, Jacob, you say to me, Steve, the T-shirt's $5, now it's $6, right, because of the tariffs. And I go, oh man. But you then say, oh, okay, hang on, my electricity's fallen from $1 to 80 cents. Oh, cool, 20% saving. I'll hand that on to Steve.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, look, the T-shirt's going to be $5.60. Okay. And then you say, actually, Trump's lowered my taxes. Steve, the T-shirt's going to be $5.10. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's 10 cents.
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, well, I'll charge Bob $5.15 for the T-shirt.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the general idea.
Do you think the US are more poising to turn into an export economy, similar to China like 30 years ago?
Well,
bring everything back, they're reinvesting to export back to the rest of the world?
Yes and no. You see, the American economy is really self-sufficient in a lot of ways, or it can be, right? It's resource-rich, it's clever, it's got lots of capital. People love going to America, right, because you can make it. So it's not – Americans have never been that global, right? They've been dragged into the First World War, right? They got dragged into the second one, right, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. But they've always been reticent to be – what country has the World Series of baseball when you're one country, right? You look at that and go, dude, you're not the world. But they are to Americans. Right, you always see those jokes on Twitter where they say to Americans, point to a map of Spain, and they're like, "We haven't got a clue," right? They are the world, right? There's 330 of them. They're insanely rich, right? The American culture, they're nationalistic, right? They've got a lot of pride. They're all flying the goddamn flag, right? All that stuff, right? So they're not that interested in exporting. They're just interested in building their own economy, right? And that's where it's been declining for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why you've got Trump, because I think I mentioned in the newsletter, the February newsletter, I remember when we deregulated, right? The opposite of what we got going on now, right? I remember. And it was the one lasting impact was guys now my age, right, 60, who were middle managers, nice house in the suburbs, wife and 3 kids, and it was all rolling along, and they go to watch the footy on the weekend, and the little missus would look after the kids, and it was all harmony, right? And then along comes globalisation, and next minute I'm working at McDonald's taking orders from a 19-year-old manager above me. Right, when the world is run on seniority, where I've been the boss for the last 30 years because I've worked my way up the chain, right? That's an enormous change. And all of those men, mainly men, were really angry because they lost their authority, increased feminism, right? Women started telling blokes what to do, what the hell's going on here, right? All of this sort of stuff. Right? Stuff today, people go, oh, really? Was it like that? It's like, absolutely. Men had the last word. Yeah. They had the only word, right? We didn't even bother asking women what they thought, right?
Not saying that Steve agrees with that.
No. But, that's what I'm saying. That's what it was like, right? Yeah. My dad, he made all the decisions. Mum just looked after the kids. Yeah. Money problem, see dad. Emotional problem, talk to your mother, son.
Yeah.
Right, that's the way it worked. And when they lost their jobs and started having to resort to taking jobs at McDonald's wearing funny hats and uniforms like bloody Ronald McDonald, it was a huge smash in dignity for a lot of men, right? And all the factory workers, right? They were all out of work. Right, they were all unemployed. And where did they see it? They saw the people, back then it was Japan, right, who was, hollowing out the industry. Then it was Germany, right? Now it's China. Yeah. But Japan and Germany were allies, right? They were the friends. China's not the friend of the US. That's why the US have gone, now we're going to act.
Yeah, so they've reacted a little bit stronger.
Well, Yes, but because as I said, Japan never wanted to rule the world.
No.
Neither did the Germans, but the Chinese are different, right? And they're the bulk of communism with Russia.
Yeah.
So we're now back to capitalism versus communism again,
Okay.
right? And that's why I say you've got to pay attention to cycles, because you read history, you go, yep, we just
Seen this before.
We've reached the bottom of a cycle.
So what about the imposition of tariff, like the distortions in asset classes from the expectations of investors? So
Okay.
let's talk about that.
This gets a bit heavy. This is where it's also very murky, because it depends on the company and what their position is, right? So if you sell me a product, and I'm busily trying to think of one, you sell me ASML, right? A Dutch company that sells the lithography machines, that makes the semiconductors that are at the cutting edge, which America is saying don't sell them to China.
Yeah.
Okay, so ASML says, man, they've just hit us with a 40% tariff. Who gives a shit? Right, now why do they say that? They say that because they say, nobody makes the machines we make.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You could put 1,000% tariff on.
Yep, and people are still going to buy our machines because we're the smartest boys on the block.
Yeah.
Okay, Coca-Cola, right? Oh, we've got to put our price up 20 cents. Oh, that means people will buy less Coke. No, they won't. They love Coke. They're not going anywhere. They're buying Coke. They're not going to go and, I'm going to buy Mexican Coke, right? No. Right? So those companies go, cool, no worries, because they've got a durable competitive advantage, right? So they can say, sure, hand the price on. Okay. You make T-shirts in Bangladesh. The US puts a 40% tariff on you, right? And Bangladesh goes, oh, this is terrible. Why? Because Vietnam can make T-shirts. India can make T-shirts. China can make T-shirts. Africa can make T-shirts. And so now we've got to work out how we can continue to sell more T-shirts, i.e. they haven't got a competitive advantage, right? People can go, you know what? Bugger, I'm not buying any more T-shirts.
So the people at the pinnacle of their industry, so to speak, will feel it less.
Well, no, pinnacle, it may be the right word. If you've got a comparative advantage, you'll probably be okay because you're not going to suffer from increased competition.
Yeah.
Right? This is what we talk about with the durable competitive advantage in the Well 3 program.
Yeah.
Right? This is Buffett territory, right? Buy the companies that have got a lock on, because they can raise prices without losing market share or lowering demand, right? Cigarettes, booze, Coca-Cola, stuff like that, right? They're the things where people say, I don't care if smokes are $45 million a packet, I'm buying a packet of smokes, right? Because they've got an addiction to them.
Yeah.
That's why governments always put up tobacco taxes, petrol taxes, and beer, right, or alcohol, because no one says, you know what, I'm going to cut back on my drinking. No, they don't. They just cop it and whinge about it, right? Right? Like I do. Yeah. Lint chocolates are $8. Bugger that. Give me a lint chocolate too, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, another step down, product substitution. Okay, so I can say, all right, ASML, no substitutes, I'm going to have to cop it, right? Yep. And I'll put the price on to the end user. So the iPhone might go up by $15 or $100 because the parts of it are now more expensive. Okay, you say, all right, I'm just going to hold on to my iPhone, right? Okay, lower demand for Apple, less profit. Warren Buffett sells more of Apple, right? Because the profit margins are falling. Okay. Second step, I say, God, man, these bloody petrol prices are killing me. All right, I'm going to buy an e-bike, an e-scooter, right? Product substitution. Businesses say, man, this oil is terrible. Okay, let's buy natural gas, right? So again, it will stimulate innovation by saying, this is expensive, now I'll have
What's
to change.
the alternative?
Right? Yeah. So we may get a huge productivity increase. It depends. Again, it depends.
Yeah.
The other one is, what else have we got? Product. Now, this is one where it doesn't sort of make sense. The US imports all the coffee beans. It doesn't grow coffee beans. Okay, so coffee becomes more expensive because of the tariff, right? Because the US hasn't got a local industry, so the coffee bean importers say, "I'll just put the price up," right? Customers say, "Oh, well, stuff this. I'm going to start buying English breakfast tea." Right? Or, I'll instead of 5 coffees, I'll have 2.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know about you. I paid $5.50 yesterday for a goddamn small flat white.
Yeah.
I nearly fell off my bloody chair. The other day I paid $6.
Well, that's similar to the cigarettes thing, though. Like, we're noticing prices going up. I'm not decreasing consumption. People might be, but it's an addiction.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Love a coffee.
I'm whinging about coffee, but I'm still drinking it.
Yeah.
So, but that's an example. It really depends, Jacob, at a company level on what the industry dynamics are.
Can they afford to reduce their profit margins? Is a big question.
Do I my cost basis has gone up 20%? Okay. Do I say I'm going to cop it, and instead of making $1 a t-shirt, now I'm going to make 80 cents? Do I say, all right, well, I'm just going to put the price of the t-shirt up and absorb the tariff?
Yeah.
Right? Or do
that reduces demand and decreases sales. You got to run the gauntlet.
Yep. Or like Coca-Cola, do you say, this is fantastic, I'm going to charge an extra 25 cents a cup? Right?
And we're just going to run with it and see what happens.
Yeah. So it really gets down to the country dynamics.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is a little bit confusing. I don't want to blow people's brains out with it, but the couple of things I wanted to highlight. One of the responses is, you're China, I'm America, right? Jacob, you're going to got a 70% tariff. So you say, okay, I'm going to cut my exchange rate by 70%.
Yeah.
Completely neutralised, right? Now, if you do that, nothing changes. Right, because I import a 50-cent T-shirt from you and you go, Steve, I've just cut my currency 70%, T-shirt's still 50 cents.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so that's non-inflationary. I don't need to raise the price of the T-shirt, right? Okay.
But not every country can do that.
No, that's right. So if there's no currency offset, if you say to me, no, Steve, I'm not cutting my tariff, my currency, I say, okay, well, I've got to raise the price of my T-shirt.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Incidents. This is an interesting one. One of the Trump arguments is the foreign country pays the tariff. Right? Now, everyone's gone, that's bullshit. Steve's paying at the border an extra 20%. Okay. Steve is, but let's take it at a national level. What Trump is arguing is this. You send me the T-shirt that's $1, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I put a 20% tariff on you and you go, okay, I'm going to offset it. Now, what happens there? Okay, so your currency now falls.
Yeah.
Your currency falls, which makes you poorer, and your imports have now gone more expensive because your currency's lower.
Right.
You with me?
Yeah, I'm following.
Okay. Bit confusing, but your currency falls, which means when you import something from Australia, right, at $1,
you're paying more.
Now you've got to pay $1.20.
Yeah.
So again, you go, oh Jesus, now my costs have gone up anyway.
Yeah.
That's what Trump is arguing. Trump is saying,
when you peg it to the US dollar.
Yes. Well, no. That's with the, yes, sorry, you're right. With the currency offset.
Yeah.
Right. So you go, my prices have gone up 10%. I'm going to reduce my currency 10%. Oh, but Jesus, now my imports are 10% more.
Yeah.
Right? That's why Trump is saying they will pay for the tariff.
No, but he's not articulating it properly.
Well, as I just described it, it's a bit like, Steve, can you just go through that again a couple more times?
Just rewind that one, folks.
Yeah. If they don't offset the currency, you get more expensive goods.
Yes.
Right? If they say, like we just said before, no, mate, T-shirt's $1.20. Right?
Yeah.
I go, okay, well, now the T-shirt's $1.50. Right? As you said, lower demand. Okay? Trade flows. If they offset the currency, right, i.e., I'm going to got my currency 10% to neutralise it, right? This is why Trump's tariffs on China are 70%, right? Because he's saying, well, you're not going that low.
Yeah.
Right? Little effect on trade flows as effect import prices don't increase. Regulatory reform offset currency effects on exports. Trump is saying, so again, when you think about this, folks, just don't think about tariffs. Think about also Trump saying, I'm going to cut taxes. I'm going to deregulate the economy, right? And those are going to be upsides which will make it cheaper.
For the US citizen.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right? Mainly for US business.
Yes.
Right? Man, I got all this goddamn red tape. I need to speak to all these environmental assholes about building a mine. Trump goes, don't worry about it. No more environmental regulation. I just saved $5 million, right? That's offset the price of my iron ore going up $20 because of the tariff.
Got it, yeah.
Okay? So he's reducing the costs, right, equivalently. Rebalancing, if they don't have a currency offset on trade flows, rebalancing over time as imports are more expensive relative to domestic production, right? So if there's no currency offset, you say to me, well, Steve, the T-shirt's now $1.50. And I go, dude, I can buy one from Billy in Alabama for $1.55 and he gets it here the next day. Okay. Billy in Alabama is now going, I love these tariffs. These are great shit. I'm selling more T-shirts. Because now you're on a level playing field with the Chinese import.
Yeah.
Right? That's if there's no currency offset.
Yeah, so in theory could stimulate US business even more, like tenfold.
Absolutely. That's what he's trying to do. He's actually saying, bring the factory back here. Now, he's not necessarily saying, bring your crappy T-shirt factory back here.
No.
He's saying, bring your advanced manufacturing back here, right? That's what Biden did with the CHIPS Act, right? And the inflation. They didn't say, hey, we want to build T-shirts.
No,
they
bring the smart folk back here.
They said to TSMC, right, Taiwan Semi-Manufacturing, bring your $50 billion factory back here, we'll give you $10 billion, right? And TSMC went, that's great.
Sounds good.
They don't care about T-shirts or bottled water or coffee beans.
Yeah.
This is about national security where they're saying, we want a defence supply chain here that if China turns nasty, doesn't matter, we'll build our own ships, right? We've got our own rare earths.
Yeah, we can look after
right? We've got a
ourselves.
processing chain here because people don't realise how much everybody's reliant on China, right?
So what does it mean? Like, obviously 90% of our listeners are Aussies, right?
Yep.
So what does it mean for the Aussie, particularly talking about if we're devaluing the Aussie dollar?
Yep. We'll get to that in 2 more slides.
Right, got it.
You're ahead of your time.
I'm getting there.
Righto, stay with us, folks. Stay with us. There's a diagram. Get the slides. Go and read it. It's basically a bit of a flow chart about what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. What are we going to do? As we mentioned, China says, "Oh well, we're going to devalue our currency." Okay. Now, get it out, Steve. Yesterday, Friday. Is that right? No, sorry. Today, Saturday, China said we are putting 34% corresponding tariffs on the US.
Yes.
Okay. US said 34 on China. China said 34 on you. Right? Okay. So one response is you tariff us, we tariff you. Okay. Welcome to the shit fight.
Yeah.
Righto?
Stock market has responded by futures being down 6% when this is actually launched on Monday.
Exactly right. Okay. Managed exchange rates. Righto. So the Japan goes in and agrees to a dirty float. A dirty float of the currency is simply saying...
Sounds like a bad toilet joke.
It's simply saying, look, we won't let our currency fall below a line, i.e., look, if we reduce our currency 20%, nothing happens. Donald Trump comes along and says... don't let your currency go below 5. And Japan goes, yeah, okay. So if it looks like going lower, the central bank intervenes and keeps their currency high.
Right.
Okay, so in other words, they can't go like China, we'll just cut the currency. When Trump did it the first time around, China cut the currency 18% to negate the 20% tariff.
Yeah.
Right?
Just overnight.
Yep.
Wow.
So... okay, reciprocal tariffs. Yep, we got that bit, right? You hit me with 10, I hit you with 10, right? Reduced use of the US dollar. Highly unlikely. Look, this is long and I haven't got enough time here to bore you with it completely. The US dollar is the world's currency. Whenever shit hits the fan, you buy US dollars, right? Why?
Everything's pegged up to the US dollar.
Exactly, right? They're big, they're rich, and they'll pay you if you buy US dollars, you will get your money back, right? You buy US bonds, they will pay you.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the arguments is, they'll de-dollarize, right? In other words, they'll let the dollar fall, and that will cause the US some pain, right? Probably unlikely to happen.
They're the most liquid country.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas
they're just too big, mate.
Yeah.
They're just too big.
where
right?
else are you going to go? Yeah, Europe's miles off.
Yes.
Being there.
Well, nobody wants to be the world currency, Jacob. The US is the lender and buyer of last resort. And that's why I say these other countries are going to have to bloody well step up, right? It's their own fault that they've done this, right? It's like me punching you in the face all the time. You punch me and I go, Jacob, what the hell, right? That's honestly, that's what it's like.
Yeah.
And I say to you, well, I told you, stop punching me in the face, right? Well, and I'm, you're supposedly outraged about, or I'm outraged if you punch me back.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? So you can do nothing and accept the tariffs, right? A little bit like Australia, right? But what we're doing, what Albo's doing is we're appealing to the WTO,
He's
right?
been a good boy.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to play by the rules,
Yeah.
and we're going to go to the World Trade Organization and we're going to say, listen, this is not fair and it's not in the agreement, right? And in 2085, they'll come back with a decision. They'll go, you know what? You guys were right in 2025. And we go, who fucking cares? It was 60 years ago, right?
Well, yeah.
I.e., that's
Who do you think funds?
we're not doing. We're not
funds
doing
the WTO.
it. Yeah, well, besides that, no one listens to them anymore, right? That's why I think we said in the last the podcast coming up,
Yeah.
the arguments and disagreements with China about the illegal subsidies has gone through the roof, and the Chinese just like, yeah, whatever, right? Because they know it'll take ages. Okay, agree to US demands, right? This is where Australia's got a bit of a problem, right? Because the US will say to us, stop feeding China, right? And otherwise, we'll be moving Darwin bases. We won't be doing AUKUS. We won't be selling you military protection. Right?
China will say the same thing, saying we won't be buying your residential real estate.
Well, yes and no, but we're in geopolitics now. It's all about war, right?
Yeah.
It's all about protection. So that's why everyone's going crazy on defence spending, right? Now, a couple of things. An overall caveat is everything is up for grabs, so it depends what happens. But my main point is none of these markets are in there deciding it. This is politics. Right, this is national governments against each other. So watch the politics, right? And politics is about power, right? It's not about, hey, I'm paying another $1 for my T-shirt. It's like, shut up, we're building bombs here, right? And it's like, okay. So you're going to see a lot more of that, right? The biggest problem is for the exporters,
Yeah.
right? That's why everyone's screaming about their exports, right? Japan, China, Europe especially, right? And the Southeast Asian countries, right? With the big tariffs, right? Because they've got excess capacity, right? So they're the ones that are in trouble because they say, well, we can build 50 million cars and we've got 10 million workers there, and now we've got to get rid of 5 million workers because the US won't take X, Y, Z. Shit, look at all this unemployment.
And we're
now,
stuck with all these excess.
That's
goods.
right. Now what do we do, right? And think of it like this. In China, they go, some people are getting really pissed off about this. Social unrest is the last thing a communist government wants, right? That's why they suppress it, right? So that's where it's a bit like, we've got to give these people jobs or something, right? We've got to get some way to reorient our economy. Trump said, right, raise your consumption, right? Last one, trade-off, agree to tariffs to become part of the US security umbrella, right? Japan and Australia, right? We go to Donald and we say, listen, dude, okay, we'll cop the tariffs, but we want military cooperation, right? And Trump says, yep, okay, all right. Here's the deal. You buy our bonds and that will help fund us the military spending to protect you.
Right.
What you talked about before when you said, so we go to BHP, just for example, right? And we say to BHP, listen, dude, can you stump up $100 million to buy those US bonds? And BHP go, mate, they're only paying 3%. It's like, yeah, we know, but can you just give them the money? Right? Because the Americans can then fund the military hardware that they send over to Australia to protect us from adversaries.
Yeah.
That might be, sailing down around the bottom of the country.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
That's why I say this is all politics.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like we'll have a variation of most of them until we find like a settling point.
That's why it's going to be really, really fluid, and you just need to have a plan and stick with it, right? So the wash up, okay.
Tie it up.
Buffett says that tariffs are an act of war. Okay, this is the shot across the bow.
Yeah.
Right? This is the start. We are no way near the finish, and it will probably take 3 to 5 years, right? Until we get what's going on, until everybody tries to work out Donald Trump, until we trust the US again, all of that sort of stuff, right? Remember the old political saying I said a while ago, never waste a crisis. It's a crisis.
Oh, they're not wasting it.
Right? So now's the opportunity to say, right, I couldn't do that to you before. Now I can because it's a crisis.
Yeah.
Right? And nobody will argue. Right? That's why national security is great. Nobody ever says, man, we don't need any guns other than the greenies.
We need to protect ourselves.
Exactly right. Why are we spending all this money? Dude, we need to protect the nation. And it's like, oh, cool. Okay, yeah, groovy. I agree with that. Right? Nobody ever says, why are we spending all this money? It's terrible. And it's like, shut up. We're being protected. That's what's going on, right? Like I said to you about before, when you have a crisis, people love leadership.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Because they make decisions and we're protecting people from the floodwaters.
And everyone wants a scapegoat if it goes wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, right? Steve said this. It must be bad.
Yep,
yeah.
That's right. Okay, the US is sick of being buying lender of last resort. We've talked about that. Sick of being the lone protector of global sea lanes, right? It's great the Americans are paying $1 trillion a year to protect the sea lanes while I just cruise on by. Hey, thanks for you guys for being my protector. I'm just making shitloads of money selling you stuff.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's going on. Countries such as Japan, China and Europe for underconsumption, right? Buy more stuff, you guys. Which would be good for Australia, right? Yep. Commodities. And trying to weaken US manufacturing, right? We don't make them rare earth processing now, and therefore we can't build bombs and planes and stuff, right? That's a really big one. Okay, second bit. Let's all just calm down and take a deep breath, right? Unlikely to happen, but that's what I recommend. Global trade has to be dealt with globally, not piecemeal approaches like tariffs, okay? So, for example, the US has tariffed us, right, and said, we won't buy their beef and stuff. That's not going to fix their problem, right? You've got to deal with this at a global level. That's why Trump is tariffing everybody, right, because it's got to be done globally. I won't bore you with the intimate details, right? They don't deal with the main problem, right? Deal with currency manipulation. Right? Japan does it, Europe does it, China does it. They're the main offenders. Every time the US wants to do something, they drop their currency and therefore nothing changes. Okay? That's a really big one. It's a really big one. The US dollar's role in the global economy and the underconsumption of China, Japan and Europe. Okay, again, when you have a low currency, imports are expensive and therefore you don't buy a lot, but you sell a lot. And that's what China, Japan and Europe are doing. And the US is the one that takes the bulk of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The US is threatening to be more like China and Europe. Okay. What the US is essentially saying is, okay, you don't want to play it like that. We'll play your game. Right? So we'll tariff you and then we're going to do all that stuff that you do to us. Right? So now you can complain, but now we're on a level playing field.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, final. Remember this, right? Markets go up and down. That's it. Right? They go up or they go down. They don't explode, go to zero, go to infinity, right? each company and sector will have to calculate the costs and benefits, right? Might be good for BHP, might be bad for Woolies, right? You have to have a look at that. But in terms of the market overall, it's probably a negative in the short term. Stock market.
Yeah,
right.
Always seen that.
Absolutely. Everybody, it's complete uncertainty. Bugger this, I'm going to cash.
Yeah.
Right. Does that mean you should go to cash? No. It just
doesn't mean you should have some cash.
Just means you might sell down some of your portfolio to go to cash.
Yeah.
Right. Even if you take a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I'm not recommending that, I'm just saying if you look at it going, oh man, I'm down $5,000, and you're not seeing in 3 months you could be down 15.
Yeah.
Now, you could be up 5. All I'm saying is there's a lot of uncertainty, and apologies, I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen.
Well, no one can.
No. Yeah. So that's where investing is like, right, now you're going to knuckle down and work out your allocation.
This is why we harp on about having cash and rebalancing always.
Yes.
Not being fully invested.
100%, right?
And hedging.
It's no good when these fund managers go, oh, it's a great time to buy the dip, and it's like, with what?
Yeah.
I haven't got any money.
No one's got money, yeah.
Right? And if the tariffs are bad, it's like, and now I'm unemployed. Like all those MAGA voters who voted for Trump, and then Musk came along and sacked them all. And they all went, now I'm unemployed. Mm. But I voted for you. It's like, welcome to the world, right? Okay. There's just too many variables. Tariffs are not the only one. You've got currency manipulation. You've got non-tariff barriers. You've got a whole range of export taxes, import controls, export licenses, import licenses, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right, will come into play. Right? China already did that with gallium and germanium. Right? You want to sell that stuff overseas, no problem. You got to talk to us first. Yeah. I.e., right, we're going to control the export of that, which is going to hurt the US, which is what they've done today with the critical minerals. Right? So expect a big fight. Yeah. Now, flip side, that might be great for Australian rare earth companies. Right? Not saying it is, but the Americans might say, righto, we've got companies down there in Australia, go and talk to them because they're our ally, and get them to sell us the stuff that they've been selling to China.
Yeah, so if we play the cards right, it could work out.
You got Chinese shareholders? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, see you later.
Get rid of them. Right? We'll become the new shareholders. Right? That sort of stuff. Yeah. Right? Peter Dutton said today, I think, Northern Territory's got a Chinese company's got a 99-year lease on the port. Dutton said, if I get elected, that comes back into Australian hands. Yeah. Right? Okay. Don't panic at every bit of news. Right? Don't freak out because there's going to be a heap of news because the media's job is not to tell you what's going on. The media's job is to get you to click on an article, right? Foreign ownership is high. In the US market, as we've said, they may need to sell down, right? There's one problem. Second problem, which I think is more concern, margin debt. Now, the reason why is, as you mentioned before, Thursday and Friday were big falls, right? 5%. First of all, that's like a 1 in 8 million event, according to the standard theory. Yeah. Secondly, that'll trigger a lot of margin debt, right? So there's going to be a lot of blokes over the weekend. And as you said, the markets are down.
6 on Monday.
6 on Monday, which is today. Now, they might improve, but what we're saying is there's a lot of, pardon the blokes over the weekend going, man, we need to think about this because now we're going to get a margin call. Right? Or they're now going, actually, now we're 5% away from a margin call. Yeah. Should we sell now to bank up the money? Yeah. Right? That's a biggie, right? We've still got a high CAPE. We've got high overall debt levels, right? Particularly in Australia with residential property. So might have to watch that. And so I think there'll probably be more downside. But given Trump's proclivity to announce things on the roll, we could have a short-term rally. Yeah. And this is what you see in bear markets, right? People go, oh, it's all terrible. Hey, they just said they're going to build a higher. Hey, cool, great, let's jump in the market. They all jump in, right? Goes up 10%. Oh, it's all good again. It's all, everyone loves each other. Oh, no, they don't. They just said blah, blah. Oh, shit. Down 20%, right? And this is where you get that volatility.
Yeah, so I guess have some cash, have a strategy, and don't be too jumpy with your positions.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. Just don't panic, right? Just always take a deep breath and try to stay as rational as possible.
Feel free to reach out to us, obviously, as always, if you have any questions. We might wrap it up there, though, Steve.
Yep.
That was great. Hopefully that made sense and helped some people, and it'll tame down the questions on tariffs moving forward. But if it doesn't, reach out, like we said. If you are listening to this and you've held on for an hour, good job. Please jump in and leave us a review on whatever platform that you're listening on. Thanks.
Cheers, folks.
Cheers.
As always, remember, we don't provide financial advice.